but I can go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you for joining, everyone. I am Sarah Peel. I'm one of the speech therapists on McKibben and Monty's team. And today we will get to speak a little bit about your child's language development, how you can support them at home, and how to create a more language-rich environment. McKibben and Monty really focuses on supporting kids' development through their language and literacy, and offers speech therapy and OT. So I'm on their speech therapy side. Cindy, anything else you wanted me to go over before we get started?
I think you're good to go. And we're going to just have questions at the end. So hold any of those to the end if you would.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I will have a few minutes at the end to answer any questions. If you'd like, you can go ahead and pop them in the chat while we're presenting, and I can go back to the chat and answer some with the time that we have left. And if we could keep it to kind of general questions about either the information I'm presenting or any further recommendations based on that. And if you have child specific questions, then I will give you some more information about how to bring us those at the end. All right, let me go ahead and share my presentation just so that we have something to be able to look at. So the focus of our presentation is supporting your child's language development. And so as a little brief overview, some areas that we target in speech therapy are speech sound production, expressive and receptive language, so how a child is able to use and understand language. We work on social communication, more broad than social skills, but how we use language to communicate socially. We do work on feeding, as well as early literacy skills and play skills, which I think are not often thought of as something that we work on in speech therapy, but they're integral for that early language development. So I have some kind of general language milestones for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and 4 years. And so these are just kind of broad skills that children, we kind of look to be able to do at these different ages. So if I have a 1-year-old in front of me, I look at overall with their expressive and receptive language skills, seeing, okay, do they have a few words that they're using expressively? Are they imitating sounds? They won't necessarily have words, full understandable, usable words at this point, but they are kind of imitating sounds that we would use, like consonants, ba ba ba, ma ma ma. Some of those words we want to hear them playing around with. We want to see some social reciprocity. So if you look at a baby and they're smiling at you, you're laughing and you're kind of mimicking a conversation, those are some of those social reciprocity skills. And we'd like to see a 1-year-old generally being able to follow a one-step direction. Like, oh, pick up the ball. For a 2-year-old, we'd like to see them have about 50 words that they're using on a regular basis. This is going to be enough expressive vocabulary to let them start combining words, like my ball, go up. Words like that are ones that we're going to be able to combine at 2 years old. We would like to see them start to use pronouns. They're not going to necessarily be accurate all the time, but again, a word like me or my, they might use a word like her for everyone. That's okay. It's still use of a pronoun. We'd also like to see a 2-year-old be able to identify some common objects and body parts. And at 2, kids are roughly 50% intelligible or able to be understood half of the time. At 3 years old, we'd like to see a child's vocabulary continue to develop so that they can combine more words into sentences. We'd like to see them use 3 or more words in a sentence. This is going to show that they have not just objects, but they also have action words. They have pronouns. They have all those different types of vocabulary that they're then able to interchange into sentences. We'd like to see a 3-year-old start to take turns in conversation, like asking and answering questions, continuing exchanges beyond just more than one communicative exchange. They can, at 3 years old, start to make requests verbally more frequently rather than just pointing or hand leading. A 3-year-old can follow 2-step directions, like, okay, let's get our shoes and our coat, or let's get our shoes and put them on. And at 3, they're roughly 75% intelligible. And then at 4 years old, kids will generally be intelligible to unfamiliar listeners. A lot of times if you have a preschooler that you meet, you might be able to ask them their name, understand what their name is, how they say it, and generally understand what they're saying. And then at 4, we'd also like them to continue to develop more complex sentence structures, increase their how long their sentences are. A 4-year-old should be able to identify colors and follow more steps in the directions so that they're able to complete more routines and directions with more independence. And then at 4, we should be able to verbalize our wants, needs, and requests through verbal language, and it should be able to be understood by adults around them. So that's just kind of to paint some broad strokes of what we're looking for at language development at 1, 2, 3, and 4 years old. And then some of the main strategies that I like to let parents in on when they're working on their child's language development. I have modeling, which is essentially just showing a child how they can use their language, how we want them to. So if a child, if we're working on labeling body parts, maybe we're in the bath and we're modeling, here's our nose, here's our eyes, here's your mouth, you know, just modeling that vocabulary and adding some of those visual components like pointing can help with that vocabulary acquisition too. Recasting means we're saying it, what the child says back to them, but more correct. So if a 3-year-old says, her go, you might respond and say, you're right, she is going. So we're just responding with what we want them to say rather than saying, oh, don't say it that way, say it like this. Expansion is a strategy where we kind of take what a child gives us and bump it one step further. So if we're trying to get a child to use 2-word combinations and they're able to, let's say, label truck, we could say, you're right, it's a red truck, it's a fast red truck. So we're adding an extra layer onto what they're giving us verbally. And then narrating is a strategy that is literally what it sounds like, where you narrate what you're doing, you narrate what the child is doing. And that gives the child examples of sentence structures. It gives them a verbal model for vocabulary concepts of what they're doing and what's in their environment. And so all of these strategies can be incorporated within what you're already doing at home. And you don't have to spend, you know, hours in a day working on language development specific tasks, because the way that a child learns language the best is through natural routines and play. So a lot of these strategies, you can use them within any of those activities. So I have some examples of some activities where I've kind of broken down how to use these strategies, and then some more examples of activities that you can do and try some of these strategies on your own. So the first kind of summer language activity that I came up with is ways that we can develop language at the pool. This is probably something that you've already done this summer or that you're planning on doing, even if it's, you know, kiddie pool in your backyard. Things that you're already going to be doing anyway are kind of the best way to target language skills. So some ideas that I came up with of what we could target with being at the pool. We could work on some core words. Core words are the most frequently occurring words in the English language. And so I kind of call them like power words. Like if we work on one of these core words with a kid that has minimal expressive language, they can use it in a lot of ways. So we could use stop and go. If we're saying, okay, let's go, 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 and splash, and then stop and freeze. That incorporates core language. It incorporates imitating gross motor movements, and it's easy to do. You can use some more words like, saying if you like something or you don't like something, seeing, you know, if then that gives your child the capacity to use that in more contexts. And then some more words that you could target with being at the core, asking for help, and using the word want to request items. You can narrate your actions and your child's. When you're at the pool, there's a lot of movement that we're doing. And so if we're saying, let's splash, let's swim, that gives them some verbs that they can add to their vocabulary. And it is more vocabulary that's specific for that activity that they could use. And then on the same line of some vocabulary development at the pool, you can label toys. You can, again, work on those specific verbs for the pool, and you can use describing words like, the water is so cold, that's such a big splash. We can work on making requests for continuation or cessation of an activity. So again, that's how you can work stop and go. You can work on being able to verbally make a request. And of course, that's a skill that a lot of kids get really frustrated with if they can't verbally make a request or if their requests are not understood. You can work on taking turns in play. So if it's tossing a ball back and forth, if it's, mom splashing in the water and she stops, and then baby splashes in the water and they stop. That's an example of that attention to the same task. You're taking turns back and forth, and that's kind of one of those pre-linguistic skills before kids are going to be able to have conversations back and forth. They have to understand that we can take turns back and forth. Like I said, that joint attention means that you're both having a focus or engagement with the same activity. That's an example of something that we might target with social communication with a young child. And it's also shared enjoyment. So if you're laughing and engaging and playing with your child, that's when they're going to be the most receptive to learning and understanding that language, because it's important to them. You can work on imitating actions like splashing, gesturing, like pointing, and sounds, even if it's not complete words. If you're using, like, saying like boom or whoosh, those are some of those ways that kids can also learn how to imitate early sounds. You can use expansion. If your child is trying to tell you what they want to do in the pool, or if they're making requests, you can then expand back what they say to you. So if they're giving you 2 words, like, no splash, you could say, oh, we don't want to splash right now, or let's stop splashing. That gives them more examples of more complex grammatical structure. And then some routines that you can use when you're getting ready to go to the pool or coming home, things like packing and unpacking, using words like in and out, using multi-step directions, things like cleaning up and getting dressed. Those are routines that you use on a daily basis, that you can really use some targeted language strategies during those routines. Let's say, one afternoon, you're going to go to the pool and you think, okay, just during this routine, I'm going to try these strategies out the whole way through and just see how it goes. Try them on for size. The next kind of idea that I gave of an activity is using language at the library. A library, public library, is a fantastic free resource that you can use for so much language development. Just having a child enjoy and appreciate books from as early as possible is going to help set them up for success farther on in the future, not just when they're learning to read, but when they're learning language. Shared story reading is a language-rich routine and activity in itself. So dialogic book reading is a strategy where you essentially turn reading not just into, the adult reads and the child listens, but it turns reading into a conversation. It creates dialogue around what you're reading. So whether it's giving a fill in the blank sentence, like, I think it's and then your child can fill in a blank. Or if you are just kind of looking at pictures in a book and describing what you see and making predictions, those all create story time into an engaging language-rich environment for that child. and it makes it more fun for the kid. That's kind of the main point, is making, shared story time, not just a time for them to sit and listen, but a time that they are having fun and they're engaged. Nursery rhymes are a great way to develop early language. You get some of those rhyming words, you get a verbal routine. A lot of times they're fun and silly. And so that gives a child a great platform for developing some of that early language. Repetitive books are really great for language development because it allows the kid to like pretend to read. It gets them engaged in that dialogue that you're having about the book. An example of this would be like brown bear, brown bear. Brown bear, brown bear, what do you see? Then your kid can start to pick up on that routine. The farther you're going in the story, it repeats. And so that encourages the child's verbal participation in that book. Some different kinds of books that are engaging, especially with younger kids or kids that aren't quite at that level of being able to sit and attend for very long, is books that are physically engaging. So for example, lift the flat books, touch and feel books, polka dot, which there are books that have little plastic bubbles on the pictures, and the kid can take their index finger and kind of poke them in. So not just is that great for engaging in the story, but it's also great for fine motor development as well. You can incorporate the child's interest in the books that you're getting. So if you're going to the library, a lot of kids sections in libraries have lower shelves, specifically so that kids can engage with the books themselves. So if there is a certain topic that your child is interested, whether it's trains or animals or fairy tales, princesses, unicorns, you name it, whatever your kid is interested in, there will be a book at the library about it. So if you let your kid down and look at books, pull them out, engage with the books, they're interesting and fun to look at. And so if the child is able to independently kind of peruse the materials, they'll lead you to what they want to look at and what they want to read, and they'll be more engaged. Read aloud routines, just kind of establishing that, either when we're in the bath, we're going to listen and hear a story. Before bed every night, we'll listen and hear a story. This will just kind of establish familiarity with that routine and let the child know, okay, this is just a part of what we do. Reading is just part of our routine. Again, start as early as you can, just having kids engage with books, even if it isn't necessarily reading books. But if they have books at their level for them to play with, if they are exposed to those books early on, it'll create more interest. And then including your child in the process. I kind of touched on this as far as choosing books and the materials, but also when you're reading with them, have them open the book for you, turn the page, point at the pictures, really creating reading books not just as, again, a time for them to listen and absorb that knowledge or language, but a time for them to really engage with you as their parent and with the books that you're showing them. And then just kind of a few other ideas of activities that you could apply these same strategies to that you're probably already going to be doing this summer. Bubbles is one of my favorite. Again, it also works on that finger isolation when you're popping bubbles. Drawing with chalk, going to the playground. Again, a lot of these activities are also, they engage the whole body. So when kids are moving and they're involved in the activity with their body, they're more likely to be engaged, learning, and then will absorb that language. And then I just have kind of a rough list of red flags that I would look at each stage in development. So for a 12-month-old, if they aren't responding to sound, they aren't having that exploration with sound and babbling, they aren't imitating facial expressions, gestures, or sounds, or they aren't using gestures, those are all kind of skills that I would be looking at as developmental red flags for developing language further on. At 2 years, some skills that would be that we would like kids to have, that if they're kind of showing these skills, it's more of a red flag. Not really using many words or gestures, they don't have first words, they can't follow those simple one-step directions, and they aren't yet using that word no. I'm sure a lot of parents know the terrible twos. Kids learn how to use no and they use it emphatically, developmentally. That's great, because they're learning the use of that word. So if a 2-year-old isn't using that word no yet, I would want to keep working on that. At 3 years, if a kid is not using very much verbal speech, if parents are having a hard time understanding them, if they are not understanding spoken language around them, they have a hard time naming objects, just simple objects in the environment. They're frustrated when they're communicating, or they do not yet combine those two word utterances. That shows that they would not have that enough vocabulary to combine yet. And then at 4 years old, it would be more concerning if a child is not yet combining more than 3 words. Their speech still is not understandable by their parents. They don't take turns in question, like during conversation. They aren't able to ask questions. It takes them a lot of repetition to be able to hear and understand what's being said to them. If they need to repeat it a lot, they can't yet ask questions, or they have a hard time finding words to express what they need. And then at any age, some language development red flags would be that a child has slowed or stagnant development, or they have regressed, or they've lost skills that they've previously been able to do. And so if you have any other specific questions for your child, if you notice any of those red flags, or if you just kind of want to boost your child's language development this summer, then this is the email address for McKibben and Monty. And it is also included on the flyer that I sent out. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I don't see anything in the chat as far as questions. Does anyone have any questions? I know that this was a lot of information that I threw at you. Does anyone have any questions about the information that I kind of went over today? Well, if any questions come up, shoot an email to McKibben and Monty. And I hope that you got some good information about how you can help support your little ones at home this summer.
Great, Sarah, thank you. I think you touched on so many important points. Really appreciate that. And again, parents, this is a great time to work on language development this summer. And just, take a break from whenever we can from technology just to talk with our kids. So thanks for your time again. If there's any questions or you have specific concerns, we are here to answer those questions. If you think that your child, is not developing the way that you would expect them to at their age, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can help talk you through that. Great. Have a great summer, everyone.
All right. Yep. Thanks everyone for taking your time today.